Sorry, Gavin, do you want me to start?
Yeah, far ahead now. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's Early Careers Employer Forum. My name is Patrice Toomey, and I'm Director of Cooperative Education and Careers here at UL. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Gavin Connell, Head of Careers, and Olga O'Sullivan, Global Cooperative Education Manager. So we're here today to share the results of this year's Early Careers Employer Survey, the largest survey of its kind nationally. And the results reflect the views of employers who either hired graduates or offered work placements during 2024 and 2025. There are complexities in the graduate and undergraduate labour markets, as you know, so we are really happy that the survey has generated responses from employers across the divide in terms of your sector, your size, your location, and the disciplines you're recruiting for. I want to emphasise that the report is very much a partnership endeavour, and this partnership was acknowledged at the recent Global Career Summit, where we won the award for Best Employer Partnership for our work in the forum and the survey. So that was really lovely acknowledgement. It is a UL report, so our team have gathered and analysed the data, but the data come from you. So we've triangulated your responses with the survey responses of 1,780 students. So we hope you'll find their data interesting. And we're also immensely grateful to the 318 employers who participated in this piece of research, a piece of research that belongs to all of us. So great to have the data, but the data are just some of the pieces of an incomplete jigsaw. As in everything, context is king. And today, Gavin and Olga will be providing us with a sense of the bigger picture. So hope you enjoyed the session, and thanks again for coming. Over to you, Gavin.
Okay, thank you, Patrice. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the 2025 Early Careers Employer Survey webinar. As Patrice said, it is great to see so many of you join us again, and equally great to welcome those who have who are new to the survey or to this session. As Patrice said, I'm Gavin Connell. I'm the Head of Careers here at the University of Limerick, and Olga O'Sullivan, Cooperative Education Manager from Global. We're going to present the key share findings from this year's survey, and just to explore what those insights mean for all of us working in early talent. So we brought in that student voice, in particular to help us in the careers side of the house, how we can actually help students be ready, be more grad ready in that sense. So the 1,780 responses have been phenomenal, right? We're delighted with that response rate from the final year students, right? Okay, so just to kind of kick us off, right? Okay, so we have about 45 minutes of slides, right? Okay, the publication is quite extensive in relation to the research and the questions that you've responded to. We're not going to present all of it here today, right? Okay, Olga will talk about where the publication is available online, right? Okay, but I think what we just took the kind of top level things that we felt would be more of interest to discuss, and just kind of our key findings, and just kind of some of the areas that we think that we were kind of reflecting on for the future, right? Okay, so strong participation again this year. Patrice mentioned 318 employers, mix very even, very similar to the last couple of years. 48% from the SMEs, 47% from large organizations, and 5% from not-for-profits. Consistent balance kind of shows us that there is a continued interest in that placement and graduate hiring across all types of organization. And I suppose for us, this session is about turning real employer and student feedback into practical actions. Okay, so we are going to look at the following areas today. Okay, we're going to look at what's changing in early careers, from placement to graduate hiring to onboarding, expectations, salaries under the kind of guise of remuneration, which covers off the benefits as well. Rise of AI in recruitment, which is the first time we've kind of delved into that area. There is a lot, but I'd say we'll keep it grounded in what employers like you have told us, right? Okay, and I suppose our takeaway, it's not just a trends report. It's really about that kind of student voice in this conversation, and that's about bridging that gap between what yourselves are offering to the market, to the students, and then what the graduates are expecting. So I'm going to hand over to Olga, who's going to take us through the first few elements of the slides. Okay.
Thanks, Gavin. So we're going to look at work placement and summer internships to start, and just, I suppose, before we delve into that, just a quick reminder for everyone on what a work placement is. So it is an assessed, structured part of a student's degree. It typically runs 3 to 12 months. It includes academic credit and often comes with pay. It is a three-way partnership with the employer, student and the university, and it is designed to support real learning in real roles. Work placement isn't just experience, it's part of the student's academic journey and development. And I suppose our observation here would be that framing a placement as a co-owned process rather than a short-term hire can shift how both employers and students approach it. So looking at our data, 83% of employers offer work placements, which is up slightly from last year, and summer internships are also on the rise, now offered by 64%. That shows a continued commitment to engaging with students early, well before graduation. And we would often hear from employers, I suppose, the importance of them engaging with us in the program to really build their brand, particularly that can be very useful for companies who maybe wouldn't be as well known as others. We do know that students talk to each other as well, so it's a great way of employers to really build their brand, as I say. Practical exposure is still one of the most valued investments in future hires, and I think this early engagement often shapes employer brand perception, its recruitment and reputation rolled into one. So looking at what placement disciplines are in demand, no great surprise here. Demand remains high for placements in engineering, IT, business, sciences and data-related fields. Arts, humanities and social sciences also feature, but with less urgency. And what's interesting is the continued emphasis on flexibility. Many employers are saying that discipline matters less than the person. So technical skills matter, but adaptability and mindset is increasingly influencing hiring. And I think for us, helping students frame the value of their degree, regardless of discipline, is key to employability. So looking now at the outlook for placement hiring, 62% of employers expect their placement hiring levels to stay the same, while 27% are planning an increase, slightly up from last year. Only 11% expect a decrease, so overall it's a steady picture with some positive movement. And I think looking at the conversion rate then, to graduate roles, it is down slightly to 31%, which was 39% last year. And this possibly reflects a greater competition or fewer guaranteed pathways. And what's interesting here is we will be making our data available to all of you, and you will be able to delve into the Power BI report because sectorally, this is actually quite different. So I suppose the likes of the public sector, for example, where it's not possible to have that graduate conversion would be a lot lower, bringing the average down. So if you have particular areas maybe where you're interested in your sector, you'll be able to delve into the data and see what's perhaps more relevant to you. So I suppose placement hiring remains stable, but I suppose there's fewer automatic graduate roles, which means that students really need to stand out more. And I think that'll be our message to the students as well. And it could also be a signal that employers and students are maybe being more selective about long-term hiring, not necessarily less committed. So if we look at onboarding of placement students, there's been a big jump in on-site onboarding for placement students, 80% this year versus 56% last year. Hybrid remains steady at 25% and remote has dropped from 13 to just 5%. And only 2% of employers were unsure about their approach compared to 6% last year, suggesting more planning and structure are in place. And I think students may not prefer this format, but I think employers are prioritizing real-world exposure, especially for those new to the workplace. And I suppose we ourselves would observe in students, they learn so much by, observing people around them, by osmosis, as we say. So, when you're working remotely, they don't have that opportunity, that same opportunity to develop. So we see this as a really, really positive outcome. This is the first time that we asked employers about salary for placement. And the average annualized salary is 26,773. And I think, again, while ranges vary by sector, it gives us a clearer picture of how placements are positioned financially. And it's a question that employers, when they're new to the programme, always ask us, can you give us a benchmark? So I think this is a really good development. It also provides a baseline to help students understand what's realistic and as I say, for employers to benchmark competitively. And I think the transparency on salary helps to set expectation and reduce second guessing on both sides. And I think our observation here is that more visibility may also help support social inclusion, because not all students can afford unpaid or low paid placements. So if we shift, looking now to graduate recruitment, we'll cover the outlook for roles, where jobs are located, and how AI is entering the process, and what students and employers are saying about expectations. There is a lot of change, but also some strong signals of stability, which is good to see. And I think graduate hiring, whilst it is involving, the fundamentals of good communication from the employer's perspective and preparation by students still matter most. So looking at where the roles are, there's 70% of graduate roles are in Ireland, with the Midwest and East leading the way, followed by the Southwest. The remaining 30% are international, mostly in the UK and EU, with smaller shares in North America, the Middle East and Asia Pacific. So students still see value in mobility, but domestic opportunities are strong and diverse. And I think our takeaway here would be regional graduate roles are thriving, but international demand and mobility remain important, especially post-COVID. And I think what's important to note here as well is that location decisions aren't just about the job. Housing, cost of living, and family connections all play a part in the decision-making for graduates. So looking at the expected hiring outlook, 88% of employers expect graduate vacancies to either remain stable or increase. That's a good sign. And 29% expect to grow hiring, while 59% say it'll stay the same. Only 12% foresee a decrease, which is unchanged from last year. So I think the graduate hiring market is steady, but still competitive. And I think this slight easing in perceived difficulty may reflect employers adjusting to expectations rather than a real drop in demand. And if we look now at the disciplines in demand, it's very interesting actually, because looking at the demand for graduates actually aligns quite closely with the placement demands, with engineering leading at 53% for both recruitment and placement. Accounting, ICT and electronics, and economics and finance also show strong recruitment and placement rates, reflecting their high demand in the job market. Data consultancy, analytics and marketing have notable placement rates, highlighting the importance of data and marketing skills, and humanities and creative fields have lower recruitment and placement rates, indicating perhaps more niche opportunities. And I think where fields with high demand for specific skills such as engineering and ICT often show balanced recruitment and placement rates due to consistent industry needs. And I think educational programs that align closely with industry requirements tend to have, again, similar recruitment and placement rates, as graduates are well prepared for available job opportunities. And I suppose it would be remiss of us to, talk about all of this without highlighting the uncertainty that has emerged since we launched the survey. There is a lot of uncertainty, and this is alive in the early careers market at the moment. So things are quite uncertain and changing. So I'm going to hand over to Gavin to bring us through the next section.
Thanks, Olga. So first time we actually kind of brought in AI usage in early career recruitment to the survey. We kind of chatted about it last year, but we've kind of felt it was very much in its infancy. So delighted to kind of add it into what we're doing this year. Okay, so as I said, it is the first time we asked employers. It's already clear that the interest is growing. Okay, so even while it's in its infancy, right? Okay, there's only 7% of employers using AI in their recruitment at the moment. 41% are planning to expand it over the next 12 months. So the main areas that they're actually looking at currently is sourcing, screening, and assessments. So in that way, it's not really replacing human judgment, which is really important as part of these conversations around early careers, but it is influencing how decisions are made, right? Okay, so most employers are kind of using AI and they're citing improved efficiency, but there's still concerns, right? Okay, around bias, data privacy, and also the concerns that they would have that kind of add on to that candidate resistance, right? Okay, so that's the students, the graduates that are coming out there are just going, I'm unsure of what this is, so I'm not going to do it. I just want to go back to the old, send you in my CV, whatever the case is. So I'm kind of the video analysis, that's kind of a concern, right? Okay, so very few, I suppose, have kind of topped off that thing of the truly improved job matching or reduced bias yet, okay, so that they can actually stand over it. So, but I do think as AI automation becomes a bit more common, it's not just about using the tech to apply from our perspective on the students. They need to understand the systems behind that. Okay, so that means, I suppose, from an employer's perspective and ourselves, it's kind of helping those students navigate application tracking systems, the AI scoring, video analysis tools, right? Okay, as I said earlier on, but it's around the student being able to be much more credible and confident, because we want them to succeed. We don't want them kind of shying away from these tools and saying, I don't want to go anywhere near this, right? Okay, and then that's not a good match for either employer or for a student graduate. So I suppose the type of tools that the employers are most interested in exploring for recruitment, very much in that kind of AI-driven assessments, predictive analytics, and video analysis, like I mentioned. So it is building, right, okay, but I think that language needs to start becoming around digital fluency. And we will talk about early career skills later on, but we think digital fluency, while it's not appearing at the moment, will become something definitely in the future. But I suppose authenticity, self-awareness, key to all of this as well. Okay, so our students, I suppose, our concern, I'll say this, right, Case, and this is kind of feedback that we're getting from the student voice, is their students were saying very few of them are actually actively using AI as part of their early careers. And we're unsure, is that actually a fact, or they just don't want to say they're actually using it because they think it's not the right thing to do, okay? So our kind of approach to this is that we're very much looking to help students or graduates prepare for that tech-enabled process. So it's not just about kind of passing we call it the AI screen. It's around students being able to use the technology to enhance what they currently have already. So it's not about, I'm going to jump into ChatGPT or Copilot and say, write me a CV. Very much around, here's what I have currently. I want you to help me professionalize it much more, right? Okay, because I'm still going to have to sit in front of somebody in an interview and talk to them about that real life experience. So it can't just be made up in that environment. And I think that's that real active professional development that we need to do with the students currently. And that's a lot of what we're doing in the last year or so, right? Okay. So moving on then, graduate trends. I'm just going to look in the areas of recruitment processes, recruitment channels, and diversity and inclusion. So the international students in relation to the graduate visas, remuneration, which is always a topic of interest that employers have for us around salaries and benefits, and then contracts and onboarding as well in this section. Okay, so jumping straight in. Okay, so our graduate recruitment application stuff, tools, right? Okay, is still very structured, right? Okay, strong applications, multi-stage interviews, growing use of digital screening, as I mentioned, right? Okay, so I think no surprise, CV and cover letters are still the most common entry point. And we say to students, it's a ticket to entry that you have a good CV now, right? Okay, coming anywhere and saying, help me with a CV is kind of a bit remedial from our perspective, right? Okay, so if they don't come to the career services with a CV that we would think is at that kind of 75-80% complete, we're kind of saying to them, you need to go away and start working on that yourself, right? Okay, so it's like a real ticket to entry from that perspective. So we're kind of saying to them, that's exactly what employers are thinking. If you're kind of giving me in a really poor CV, low attention to detail, and you just get moved out of that process from that perspective. So I suppose no surprise, CV, cover letters, it's been there for the last 10 years. I suppose the takeaway from it is that the quality of what's there is so important, right? Okay, that there's no real margin of error, let's call it that. Okay, so then when we go into graduate selection tools, right? Okay, quite a big mix here, right? Okay, I suppose a couple of things that we kind of got from a takeaway from this is interviews in person have come back very high, right? Okay, haven't been down because of what happened during the pandemic, but it's a bit like the like Olga had mentioned in relation to the onboarding for placement, same thing, face to face, looking in that person's eye, right? Okay, as opposed to the kind of digital boundaries. So very much, as I said, in person, online for the interviews, phone, video, strengths-based assessment centres. And I suppose the assessment centres kind of have bounced back, but you'll see here that 11% assessment centres in person and online 9%. So the assessment centres seem to have increased in popularity, but you can see that there's that blended kind of hybrid approach to that, right? Okay, so very tech supported in relation to what's going on in relation to selection tools. And I suppose for us, it's like I said at the start of this section, it's very much around helping students navigate the less visible stages so that they understand what's going on in pre-screening, applicant tracking systems, how do they work from that perspective. Okay, so so the pre-offer tools. So based on your feedback last year, we actually added in some additional options. So we had reference checks. Visa verification is a new one. Academic qualification checks remain standard. But so many employers were using much more in that space of social media. So a lot of students would generally think that's kind of off limits. We don't. We think that a lot of employers are actually moving into that space because it's that professional self, right? Okay, how do I look off camera, and how do I look on camera, and how am I going to present that employer? I suppose I'm always surprised 6% of employers skip pre-offer checks, right? Okay, I think I'm not sure why that happens, right? Okay, maybe it's because they've actually had them on placement, right? Okay, and it might be something that we just ask in the future in relation to why they don't do the pre-offer. Okay, I suppose a takeaway: our pre-offer checks, they still carry an enormous amount of weight, right? Okay, students need to be very aware of their professional footprint, right? Okay, and I suppose a lot of graduates, I think sometimes, I said earlier on, don't really understand that how poor a vague reference can be, and it can be detrimental to that offer. Okay, careless online content can really matter that final hurdle when it's between two candidates. Okay, so I suppose there's a lot of education in relation to the grads continuously. I suppose in some ways we forget there are different cohort of students every year, right? Okay, so even though we keep telling them, we have to keep reinforcing it every year to the students. We also asked them to ask you to rank how positively you view the following when reviewing applications. Academic fit really matters here, but really stands out as experience. Work placement, part-time jobs, volunteering. So employers really want to see that graduates can work with others, solve problems, show initiative, right? Not just the achieving the academically. They're looking for that rounded individual. Okay, so recruitment channels. So this is where employers focus on how they advertise their recruitment opportunities, okay, and then the same way as how students actually actively job search, okay. So lots of alignment here on the company websites, right, okay, but LinkedIn really underused by students, right, okay, despite it being quite a significant tool for employers there. But conversely, students value placement experiences and university vacancy systems more than employers might realize. So I suppose if you think about universities and understand the kind of the context of a student within that, right? Okay, so they're coming into the career services, they're booking appointments, they're booking into fairs, and right along that is vacancies, right? Okay, so it's amazing that there's some employers who are still not using that free access tool, right? Okay, even though those jobs are advertised there, we'll link them back out onto their company websites. I just think there's an opportunity there, right, from that perspective. And I suppose kind of adding on to that, right, okay, that LinkedIn confidence, right, okay, so not every student wants to be on LinkedIn. Fine, that's absolutely perfectly fine, right, okay, but I definitely think in the professional context, I think myself and Alga were mentioning this earlier on to each other. We were saying maybe at that kind of summer internship, that placement, kind of work placement time, that's an opportunity for employers to encourage students to actually take up a LinkedIn profile, to start to build that profile, that professional network while they're there. Equally, is a good opportunity from an employer's perspective to hold on to that student, so that they just don't disappear back into the student campus and you have a kind of a student email or whatever. Now you have them on LinkedIn, you can see their activity then as well. So maybe it's just an observation there from that perspective. This is one that every year we kind of have this conversation around disclosing salary ranges on your job specs, right? Okay, so 27% of employers currently disclose salary and job listings, right? Okay, and I suppose the change that's coming here, right? Okay, so there's an upcoming EU pay transparency directive due for implementation in 2026, and that'll require employers to publish salary ranges and job ads, right? Okay, so it's not really going to be a preference anymore. It's going to become a legal requirement. I suppose to get ahead of that, right? Okay, what we did is we asked the students, would you apply for a role if there was no salary? And 50% of them said no, right? Okay, so that's 50% of students that you've missed. So I suppose in some ways, getting ahead of that regulation, it's not just about maybe compliance, probably more around sending that message to the student body or to those cohorts you're looking for, that your organisation, we're here, we're fair, we're very student aware, and we're very transparent in relation to our salary ranges from that perspective. Okay, and I understand there's lots, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, lots of kind of blockers in relation to, can I advertise my salary? Could just be an organization's policy. We don't do it. So there's lots of things, and we got some very qualitative commentary that we'll talk about as well in relation to that. Diversity inclusion in graduate recruitment. Okay, so 62% of employers say diversity inclusion is very important. That's down from 75% last year. 29% said it's somewhat important, and that's up from 19%. So it's like it's balancing itself between the very important, somewhat important, okay, very similar to last year, okay, so still a priority. But so I suppose the shift maybe suggests that some employers are taking a more cautious or measured approach, right? Okay, not surprising based on what's going on, kind of world, like Olga mentioned, in relation to uncertainty, and uncertainty can be around kind of recession or technical recession, but equally can be around language and how that's appears from policy as well. Okay, I would say to you, students are watching, right? Okay, this activity, right? Okay, Gen Z, January graduates expect visible commitment, inclusive hiring practices, and environments where differences are welcomed. Okay, so they do watch if something disappears off that radar, right? Okay, and equally, that could actually have, you could have no real control over that from an organizational perspective as well. Okay. So we then moved on and we asked about graduate visa sponsorships for international students. So 36% of employers currently sponsor graduate visas, 64% don't, right? Okay, so we had, we pulled in why, okay, so we have about 7 different main reasons why there's barriers and considerations in relation to sponsoring visas, right? Okay, so everything from program length, right? Okay, and that's the program length of the visa, okay, not the program length of the degree or the master's, right? Okay, salary thresholds in relation to some of the those programs, right? Okay, just too high to get to secure a graduate visa. Administrative burden, there's a lot of paperwork here, right? Okay, and if you don't know what it's like, right? Okay, it can feel like it's just too much, right? Okay, especially I think if you're in a small team, right? Okay, you don't necessarily have that additional resource to help in relation to that. There's definitely sector specific policies there that actually have an issue as well. Some employers share the graduates left shortly after securing permanent residency. Okay, so that definitely raises that concern around return on investment. Why would I do it? And the person's going to leave as soon as they get that kind of the kind of green card, green stamp, or whatever the case is. Others then said, never been asked, right? Okay, didn't know where to start, right? Okay, but I suppose some of the encouraging kind of findings that we got was a lot of employers. Some employers said very open to sponsorship if the right candidate came along, or they offer informal support around documentation, right? Okay, so I suppose graduate visa sponsorship, it does remain limited currently, right? Okay, but there's a growing openness, especially with the right information and support, right? Okay, so that's kind of good to hear from that perspective. And then into remuneration. Okay, everybody hold their breaths now. This is the one that people love to see about salaries. It is a key topic for employers and graduates. We look at kind of how the starting salaries are trending, what students expect, and how salary pressure is kind of shaping some hiring decisions. Okay, so it's very clear from the data. While salary expectations remain high, many employers are kind of navigating lots of kind of internal pressures in relation to pay structures, sector constraints, rising competition from there. So a lot of data on this slide. Okay, so what I'll just explain it as is on the left-hand side for the undergrad, masters and PhD. This is the average salaries, the ranges in relation to the employer feedback. Okay, so the average salary for that is approximately 33,700. Isn't that correct, Olga? 33,700. So on the right hand side, you can see that the students' expected average salary is 33,802. So very similar, right? Okay, and I always put this caveat in. Okay, sector, location, demand, all these different things, absolutely. And we did see in some of the trends that we're going to chat, or challenges, that some starting salaries excess of 40,000 being asked for, right? Okay, so you can see that there's lots of peaks and troughs, and as Olga said, in the Power BI reports that we have and should be ready by the end of the week, you'll be able to go in and just see salary in relation to your sector, right? Okay, so you can see where that peak and trough actually impacts from average salaries as well. Okay, so I suppose, oh yeah, here we go. So how much pressure have been experienced to increase starting salary? So over 50% of the employers have actually really felt that pressure, right? Okay, there's, generally speaking, this is kind of some of our kind of thoughts on this. There is a perception gap between what graduates expect and what's been offered. It's not always large, okay, but there is enough there that a student might think that the differential of 1,000 or 2,000 is an extraordinarily large amount, right? Okay, but actually sometimes breaking that down, that also we have all these benefits, right? Okay, that equalize or actually overtake that extra bit of salary is a good conversation. So I think when we looked at that kind of conversation about salaries, very much around transparency, right? Okay, it is just about, I suppose, it's not just staying competitive. It's kind of really kind of communicating, like a bit like we said earlier on, the EU directive is going to make the salaries being published being a legislative requirement, right? Okay, but I suppose the benefits then explaining what they are, what they look like, and we'll talk a small bit about those in a couple of minutes. Okay, or actually, I'll talk about them right now. How's about that? Right? Okay, so so alignment and mismatch, right? Okay, so we just changed how we lay this out based on last year. So we have listed the benefits based on the ranking from employers 1 to 26. Okay. And then we matched them off against student preference rank, right? Okay, and then kind of did a bit of a match assessment, either high priority, needs review, all these sort of things. Okay, so in short, I think it's clear to say the strong alignment on a few key benefits, from pensions, career development, well-being initiative, very highly kind of linked together. I suppose, for example, some of the misalignments, right? Okay, cycle to work scheme ranks 2 on the employer ranking and 24 on the student preference. Truth be told, a cycle to work scheme is not an early career talent benefit. It's more an organizational benefit, and students are probably not going to see that as a benefit for, I don't know, a couple of years when they're working in an organization. But it's good to still explain to them that the benefit of it, right? Okay, but it's not that kind of thing that should be promoted overtly, right? Okay, in that perspective. But I think where we did see some mismatch, students are placing much more value on hybrid working, and that comes back to Olga talking about the onboard campus onboarding. You'll see it in the graduate recruitment as well, right? Okay, but I suppose it's that kind of strong communication around the benefits of being on campus, and maybe it working towards hybrid down the road, but not being a given that it'll happen immediately. Healthcare is a strong mismatch, and then bonuses, and we'll talk about that because there was some additional feedback from employers in relation to that bonuses conversation. So I think takeaway in this one, students prioritize core benefits that support stability, their growth, flexibility. Lifestyle perks come second, and then I suppose really, as I said, explaining why it matters, your benefits, as in what they are, what do they look like, and can help students just see behind that and behind that kind of initial salary range as part of that conversation. Graduate contracts. Okay, not going to spend too long on this one because there's quite a lot of balance between what students and employers see in relation to contracts. Strong alignment, 81% from a student perspective would rather have a full-time contract versus 79% on offer from the employers. It does take away a lot from that conversation a couple of years ago that students were really mobile and they only want to be there for a short term. We can really see that students really value that security, definitely on that kind of first early careers conversation. Fixed term contracts, definitely within the kind of, we see them within the professional services. I think there's lots of understanding within the student body that it might be a 2-year, 3-year contract and they get that, right? Okay, but I suppose there is some clarity required there, because is it a fixed term, or what's next? What happens after that 2-year term? What happens after the 3-year term, right? Okay, so I suppose if there's a value kind of around communicating a clear pathway, it's around kind of that they want structure and security, and I suppose the more conversations they get about that, the happier they shall be. And then onboarding, very similar to the conversation in relation to the placement, but this one we have the students' voice in this one as well. 79% are looking at onboarding graduates onto their site. Okay, big increase from 56% last year, but students prefer the hybrid. Okay, so 24% we're saying in relation to on-site onboarding, while 24% that said they'll defer to the employer's decision, right? Okay, but you can see that the 47% are really sitting in there that they want that hybrid activity. So I suppose we understand, right, okay, that it's so important. First job, that you're there, you're meeting people, you're getting to understand the culture, you're getting to understand the communications. So I think framing that on-site onboarding as an investment to their success can really help them shift, their perceptions of what's going to be like. And I suppose in some ways, if they've been on a placement, they might have had a hybrid option near the end of their placement, and they just think, I can just jump into that again as a graduate, right? Okay, different roles, different organizations, of course things are going to be different, right? Okay, so I'm just going to hand over to Olga, who will continue on now.
Thanks, Gavin. So this year we changed how we looked at the skills. So in previous years, we looked at the technical and soft skills kind of separately, but they were kind of bleeding into each other. So we felt that it wasn't as giving us the real picture. So we asked employers to rank the skills that they feel would be important for early career. And I suppose core soft skills still dominate. So communication, motivation, teamwork, problem solving, and attention to detail. Creativity and commercial awareness rank lower, but not because they're unimportant, but because they tend to develop with time and context. And I think what we're seeing is employers are hiring for potential. These skills are markers of early readiness and future growth. And I think for us, our observation of this is that students don't often realise how much employers value consistency and reliability as part of their skill set. So it's something we're going to be really trying to highlight for students going forward. Looking now at what employers look for in graduates and why it matters. I think beyond skills, attitude makes the difference. And I think that's what we're really seeing here. Employers value communication, willingness to learn, adaptability, and a strong work ethic. And I think while confidence is welcome, it is only welcome when paired with readiness to listen, learn, and grow. And I think what we constantly hear from employers is that graduates who show humility and curiosity often stand out more than those with just polish or credentials. And I think that's really important. So I think the right mindset beats the perfect CV, especially at the graduate level. And then we looked at what motivates students. And I suppose, interestingly, they're most motivated by recognition, achievement, and growth. So they want to feel valued and see progress. And I think job security ranks a little lower. They're focused more on development than staying power at this stage. And I think a takeaway would be that early wins and learning matter more to students than long-term guarantees. Graduates aren't just looking for jobs, they're looking for momentum. I'm going to pass you back to Gavin now, who's going to bring us through the challenges. You're on mute there, Gavin.
They were my key messages that I just missed out there, right? Okay, I just, right? Okay, so yeah, so underneath challenges, right? Okay, we kind of looked at a couple of different areas, but more specifically, more qualitative responses in relation to the questions that we'd asked, right? Okay, so the first one that we kind of looked at was around that the kind of employer challenges and then the student expectations. Okay, so when we looked at this, this doesn't really change that much every year. Like, number of available graduates from the specific degree skill sets, 69%, competition for graduate talent from other employers in your sector, 68, and so on. But what we decided to do here was start to ask a few kind of questions in relation to graduate expectations. So what did that mean if there was issues, graduates accepting offers and then withdrawn? I'm going to cover off on our slide, and then that work readiness level of graduates. We just kind of want to explore what did that really mean and what were the recurring themes from those open text responses. So no surprise, unrealistic salary expectations top, right? Okay, some, as I said before, offering asking for 40,000 without experience. Okay, a desire for rapid promotion or senior level work within a couple of months. Okay, real strong preferences for remote or hybrid work even when it's not feasible. And that was, if I recall correctly, just a job. It wasn't a job that could be done remotely or hybridly. It had to be in the office, right? Okay, so just kind of complete mismatch there from that perspective. I suppose really high confidence, but not always matched by the professional readiness that they would have, right? Okay, and then that gap between college experience and workplace reality, especially around feedback or pace. And we'll have a conversation around that kind of feedback conversation. So it was very much around the recognition, but not the feedback on performance, right? Okay, and then finally, kind of the expectation for benefits, including bonuses, healthcare, hybrid, that some employers simply just cannot afford. It's just, the graduate salaries, the graduate salary, all these additional things just are outside that scope, right? Okay, so I suppose, you know, it's, if I'm not going to choose a role in a certain location and I'm going to return to a different location, I can't be still looking for the same benefits salary level in that area, right? Okay, because that's just not how that works, right? Okay, but it's just interesting just to get that feedback, okay, from that perspective. I suppose the other one we asked around the rejecting job offers. So in 2025, 73% of employers experienced at least one graduate withdrawn after accepting an offer. Okay, that's up from 61%. So we were just saying this was going to be a challenge, but this seems to be a continuing challenge, if not an increasing challenge, because those numbers, that's a significant jump, right? Okay, so so I suppose that kind of goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago, right? Flex, kind of many things that you're seeing in that market, that graduate are reassessing decisions due to salary, location, lifestyle, competing offers, similar to the placement activities. So we did identify these 5 themes, right? Okay, so graduates often accept higher offers later, particularly from multinationals. Some may underestimate the full package of the total package and the location where they might be. Location, accommodation, kind of some of the employers citing that Dublin, Cork are so expensive, right? Okay, that prompting graduates to reconsider, maybe stay closer to their own home, as it were. Competing offers or changing plans, right? Okay, so obviously you have competing offers, but this was this plan B, plan C, that I've taken a grad offer, but actually I'm actually going to go traveling anyway. I'm just waiting to see if my friends are going with me, or I might decide to go do post-grad study. So I mean, our conversation with the grads is, if you're thinking of doing that, you need to be communicating that really early on, because it's really unfair and unprofessional not to be telling employers after accepting a role until the very last minute, right? I suppose role mismatch or expectation gaps is another challenge that came up. So misunderstanding what the role was going to be, expecting more flexibility or progression than is really realistic at a kind of an entry level role. And then there is that brand appeal, right? Okay, so graduates may now gravitate towards larger firms, better known brands, even if the role is less suitable. Okay, so we'll come back to kind of almost the conversation around the salary. Is once we're being really, really clear in relation to what is the role, and I think from our students' voice, I'll just throw it up here, right? Okay, so this is what the students were saying in relation to why they might reject a job offer, right? Okay, is what they're being told initially as part of fairs or campus activities changes once they get down the road of job offers, locations, right? So salaries may not be the same as what they were thinking it was going to be, role not as advertised, the type of contract is not the same as what they were thinking it was going to be, work location or lack of hybrid options seems to be kind of a key there across the board, and then poor company fit or culture. So I suppose sometimes just having that kind of clear comms, it's definitely clear communication around role content, the salary, the flexibility is key in relation to those conversations. Not to take away from the fact that you're never going to get this to zero. Okay, that's as simple as that. This is just active recruitment, right? Okay, but I suppose to try and limit the impact, I suppose having those things in play is always a good thing. So attracting talent over the next 12 months, 52% expected to remain the same, 43% are harder, 5% easier. Okay, so this is kind of similar to last year and the year before, that we can see that kind of leveling come. Olga kind of mentioned the kind of, I suppose, the fears that are in the kind of the markets and the economy at the moment around recession or technical recessions. And I suppose there's probably just a bit of a wait and see and just see what's going to happen. So there's no major decline in confidence, but there's no surge in optimism either in this case, right? Okay, so we're hoping that it does stay at that level, right? Okay, because it's surging down is not a good thing, right? Okay, so so as I said, there is caution there, and we're adapting, all of us, actually, in relation to what's going on out in the market from that perspective. And then just finally, just a couple of reflections and emerging themes. Okay, so I suppose some of the reflections that, just to wrap it all up for us, right? Okay, is pay transparency. It's a global standard now, right? Okay, definitely within the EU, right? Okay, it's not a nice to have. Okay. Gen Z values purpose over perks. Okay, as we mentioned, I suppose talent scarcity is now borderless. Okay, so feels like in your tech, your healthcare, engineering, it's not an Irish thing. It's a global thing, right? Okay. I suppose early careers is now brand building. I suppose early careers language kind of came in to kind of focus, we'll call it, right, okay, about 5-6 years ago, and definitely larger employers are using this as really kind of a brand strategy, okay. And I think definitely there's others that could learn from how they're doing that, right, okay, and actually kind of steal with pride, as it were, right, okay. I think definitely maybe the SMEs, public sector bodies might need to rethink how they pitch their value beyond the compensation, right, okay, from that perspective. I suppose resilience, resilience and career agility are now the new differentiators, okay. So this was around graduates who can adapt, okay, and a new kind of language is out there is unlearn, okay. So which means is I don't really want you to be focused too much on that rigid specialism. I want you to be able to kind of move in different directions. And I suppose with AI tech enhancement coming into every role, you're going to have to be able to move across and develop those skills, right? Okay, so take away from there is really that kind of unlearn. And then I suppose the candidate experience is global, okay? So no more than we're looking at recruiting international coming into the country, same way other countries are actually saying there's a great market in Ireland, maybe they want to move across Europe, maybe want to move further afield, right? Okay, so I suppose if we have systems that are a bit slow and clunky, you kind of lose those candidates really fast, right? Okay, we were at a session in January, and they were actually describing how AI had actually within 30 minutes had organized interview schedules for something like 100 candidates, what would have taken them 4 or 5 working days. Okay, so that's how quick AI is actually is fastened that kind of process for the experience for the graduate as well, right? Okay, so these things just to be conscious of, right? Okay, and then I suppose final one on this one, graduate talent is watching how you're handling that uncertainty. Okay, so they're kind of looking at everything from what do you do when there's uncertain times, economic slowdowns, layoffs, AI disruption. They kind of really want to look and see that transparency from an organization perspective. Will they take that risk and jump with you? Okay. And then finally, looking ahead, okay, so peer influence is powerful here, okay, so graduates, they don't make decisions independently, they'll be speaking to parents, they use platforms like Glassdoor, Reddit, they'll be talking to academics, they're talking to careers advisors, this good offer, that a good offer, who's whatever, right? Okay, so it's just really understand that message out to everybody. Social mobility, so beyond that kind of traditional D&I, there's a growing focus on equity of access. So that's kind of from salary, as I said, location sensitive onboarding. These are all kind of small wins from that perspective. This came back from the employers in relation to some graduates really only expecting praise, not knowing the feedback is part of their growth. You know, that's the learning, right? Okay, so I suppose to Olga's point earlier on around the conversion rates, right? Okay, are we seeing that some employers maybe just not offering graduate opportunities to maybe performers that they just didn't, or sorry, candidates they didn't think were that strong during their placement, but not giving them that feedback. Okay, so just something to kind of be mindful of. Yeah, the alumni obviously is underused. Okay, so we do see lots of employers using their graduate alumni 3-4 years, if even a year out of college, coming back on campus and actually being the representatives. And we've seen it done really well. And we've done it really bad. Okay, so the good, they have that message, they know exactly what they're speaking to, and then when we see it really bad, they don't know really how to sell the company. They're kind of saying, I'm only at the start, and I don't really know too much about it. So they're not really doing you any favors. They're just kind of there as young people at a fair. I would say make sure that if you're bringing them, that you really have given them a lot of training on how to be the best rep for you from that perspective. And then I think, oh yeah, this is for ourselves, right? Okay, so we're really interested in that graduate retention. So that's probably an additional thing we'll do next year for the surveys is how long does a graduate stay with you from that perspective. So I suppose takeaway, as graduate expectations kind of start to evolve or are evolving, so must our strategies. And that probably needs better alignment, clear communication, and shared focus on what that long-term impact is. And I suppose our takeaway is that we're here to talk about all these things at any time, right? Okay, what's working, what's not working, sharing, and even kind of, as we say, learning from each other from that perspective. So I'm going to hand over to Olga just to finish out. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, Gavin. So I suppose we're going to look at what's next. So So we have the publication is now available. So it's downloadable as a PDF, or you can view it online as a flipping book. So that's available for you now, and the QR code is there. We're going to continue with the student voice because we think that adds a lot to the data that we get from yourselves. Just to kind of give the different perspectives. I think that's really good, and it's something we're going to continue to do. And I would like at this point to thank everybody that attended today, and especially to those who are new to this forum. But I'd also like to thank all of the employers who took the time to complete the survey, because really we wouldn't be here without your input. So thank you very much for that. We are going to ask for some feedback, so we've got a QR code there as well. Just if there's any areas that we did cover that you might be particularly interested in. So we'd be happy to kind of take that feedback and, you know, improve if we can for next year. So after the meeting, we'll be sending an email, and we will have links to the publication. The webinar will be available next week, and also the Power BI reports will be available probably on Tuesday of next week, if not before. And as we said, that will allow you to have, I suppose, a deeper delve or dive into particularly maybe sectors or organisation types that might be more relevant to you. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Arlene and just check in if there's any questions. We're happy to answer any questions if there are any.